Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is February 14th, 2017. You are watching Tokyo on Fire. Defense Minister Inada was grilled on the diet floor this week about the participation of the self-defense forces in the South Sudan. Today, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Michael Cucek. We have a special guest today, Bulhan Hersi, who is the acting representative of the Federal Republic of Somalia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about what's going on in the South Sudan, why the PKO forces are there, what's the controversy, and what's the meaning of in combat that is the source of the controversy on the diet floor. Michael, you watched the proceedings. She's in a little bit of hot water because she's not really clear on what she's trying to say.
Well, she's clearly not trying to not say things that are problematic. And in the legislation that allows the SDF to be in the South Sudan, there is this concept that they cannot be in a combat zone, that there cannot be combat going on. And so she's had to dance around the word combat and not use it. And when she's been asked to provide physical evidence, what they've been providing in the diet are all these blacked out pages where you don't know what was written there. You can see the maps, you can see the graphs, but what the words were that the SDF on the ground were using to describe what was going on, those are all blacked out for security purposes.
This is a huge issue because typically the self-defense forces have been contained within Japan. This is the first example of the self-defense forces being stationed outside of the country.
Well, the self-defense forces not being stationed so much, but in a situation where there is a serious breakdown of local order. Even when they were in Iraq, they were, first of all, surrounded by either Dutch or Australian forces, but also they were in the most peaceful part of Iraq. Here, there is a general breakdown of order in Juba. And the SDF, this is supposed to be a test case for them under the new rules. But the SDF has been in that entire region, as Mr. Hersi will tell you, for quite some time and been active there. And maybe we'd like to just bring him in at this point.
Sure. You know, it's a kind of a confusing situation. Why is the SDF in the South Sudan? What is their role there? They're peacekeeping, but a lot of the Japanese really are not that concerned about the implications there. And you've been watching, you're involved in the program.
Yes, that's right. A lot of people are talking about South Sudan, but we have to also go back 2007, 2008, 2009. There has been a lot of discussion of changing Article 9. And Japan has a military base that a lot of people don't know in Djibouti. And the reason why that base was open and why SDF was sent abroad was because of the issue of Somali piracy.
Initially, that was the excuse, wasn't it?
That was the main reason to combat Somali pirates. Not only Japan, but also now you have 40 nations participating in that so-called war on piracy of the Somali coast. And Chinese also built a new base next to the Japanese in Djibouti. The French had it, the German had it. So we have to look the bigger picture. Why Sudan? Because the Chinese already are involved. 40% of the South Sudan's oil is owned by the CPCC and Sinopec. 75% of the oil Sudan is controlled by the Chinese. South Sudan army was trained and built by the Chinese. So there is a competition happening there. Also, the Chinese are there to protect their interests, not only South Sudan, but also Ethiopia, a landlocked country. Now they built railroad from Djibouti to Addis Ababa. And there's also other plans where Sudan, South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, to bring pipe to Malindi, which is a coastal city near Somali border in Kenya. And the contract was given to the Chinese. So there's a lot of competition happening there.
So it's a Japan-China competition?
Competition, yes, and it's mostly resources.
Well, this isn't the first time that this sort of battle for dominance has happened. I mean, this has been going on for thousands of years.
Yes.
Right?
It is also very clear when you look at just the issue of Somali pirates. They are, as I mentioned, 40 most powerful countries in the world, the whole EU. And there hasn't been any pirate activity last 5 years now in Somalia. And issue of piracy itself Is it only happening in Somalia? No. Malacca Strait, you have more pirate activities than Somalia.
You don't hear about that.
Zero news.
Right.
West Africa has more pirate activities than Somalia. Why Somalia? Why don't we talk about these other regions?
Right.
This is a question that needs to be asked.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think Tom Hanks is still mad at you guys for what you did with the ship. But, I mean, the issue of Somali piracy only emerged maybe 15 years ago, and I think it started because the Chinese were overfishing the area. They were kind of coming in with trawlers and just kind of sweeping all of the food stocks out of there.
Yeah, well, it's not only the Chinese. Japan is also not innocent in this case. EU is part of the game. We need to talk about the root causes of Somali piracy.
Okay.
Why it's all started. We only talk about, let's stop the Somali piracy. The root cause of Somali piracy is very clear. Illegal fishing. And it's still taking place. And also toxic waste, nuclear waste dumping, which has been well documented by the United Nations Environmental Program, the former UN envoy to Somalia. They all documented and reported that this is the root causes.
Right.
But a lot of people are shining a blind eye because they are complicit in the matter.
And the reason people are able to do the illegal fishing, the illegal dumping, is because the Somalia state is really, it's just teetering on the brink of collapse. They don't have territory forces to police the area. They don't have the ships and the vessels. They don't even have a central government that is strong enough to project any kind of power and protect. And when they say, for example, the EU says, you complain about dumping, show us the evidence. You don't even have the technology, the advanced equipment to be able to show that.
That's correct. But also, let's look Somalia. Yeah? Somalia is called a failed state.
Yeah.
But in reality, what has failed here? International community failed. It's kind of an insult to say Somali people failed. Somali people have been very resilient. They endured famine, civil war, disasters, and so forth. To say Somalis have failed is not correct to say this. But also, in this case, 2/3 of Somalia has always been peaceful. Northern part of Somalia, an area called Somaliland, and another region called Puntland. There has not been war. The war in Somalia has been only the south. Why are we only concentrating on the south part of Somalia? Yes, we had a central government collapsed. We lost also our navy, coastal guards, could not patrol Somali coast. And we're talking about the size of Somali coast is the same size as the entire Western Europe. That's why it's so difficult, these navies patrolling to stop Somalia.
It's got the longest coastline of any country in Africa, doesn't it?
3,300 kilometers long, yes. So instead of saying, let's help
and
build
no
Somalia,
effective policing.
No effective policing. And, once the pirates capture a vessel, it's too late. They can do nothing. They have to pay the ransom.
Right.
But why there is a reduction of Somali pirates recently, international community claimed that they did it, a great job. But in reality, it's not. The Somali people had a very simple agenda, which was the Somali piracy issue is not a big issue. It can be stopped. And what we did is to have observation points. We know which village these young people departure, and we put police. Before they depart, we arrest them. And after they get ransom, we also arrest them. That was the end of the story. But we asking them, help us to build our navy. Help us to build our coast guard. Give us $5 million instead of spending $20 billion.
Right.
But now these anti-piracy groups, there is a group they call Djibouti Conduct Group. 21 nations are member of it. They all receive assistance, boats, training, everything, except Somali. And we haven't received any boat yet.
Can we back up just a little bit? Excuse me, Michael.
Sure, I know that, yeah.
Why has it become a meme? Why is it easy or attractive for people to criticize Somalia? It used to be, it was the most democratic of all African nations. It's the only nation that had a smooth transition of power. When the president lost, the transition of power in Africa, it's got a completely unique and rich history, the culture, the people. How come all of a sudden people like to lean on Somalia as, the bad guy.
Well, Somalia, with our, geopolitical location, very important, we became a victim of the Cold War. We get squeezed between two powerful pacts, NATO and the Warsaw. Each one wanted to dominate the Somali region, to have a military bases and so forth.
Right.
And also, historically, we had neighboring countries. The British drew the map. Half of Somalia is in Ethiopia, another part of Somalia is in Kenya, and so forth. So we actually, our previous governments also tried to support the so-called Pan-Africanism, where we sent troops to support Angola, Mozambique, and other colonial, even Djibouti and so forth. So we had too many enemies and very little support from the other countries. Even Africans never support Somalia, the Arabs never support Somalia. So we are left alone by our own destiny.
The country became independent in 1961, is that right?
60.
In 1960.
Yes.
And they fell into the Soviet sphere. I mean, there was a kind of a period there where who's going to give us the most investment, who's going to help us develop the country. The Soviets came in better.
Yes.
They voted with the Soviets, and then as a pawn, they were kind of given up. We'll forget about Somalia and the United States and the Soviet Union cut a deal.
Cut a deal, exactly. That's what happened. And also 1977, there was a massive war outbreak, Somali region, Ogaden in Ethiopia and Somalia, where the whole Warsaw were fighting against Somalia. The Cubans, Fidel Castro and 1,500 troops, Yemenis, the Libyans and so forth. But the West watched. And that was actually a start of the collapse of Somali government and Somali army. We had the second largest army in Africa in 1970s. We were a self-sufficient nation. And also, you remember Somalia, we have the 5th oil deposit in the world, which many companies still claiming to have the concessions, even though there has been force majeure a long period of time. So what's happening in South Sudan is also
It's
similar.
not a failed state. I mean, it's a food basket, isn't it?
It is not a failed state. Somalia actually is doing better than Syria. Somalia is doing better than Yemen. We are receiving 500 refugees every month from Yemen, which is a neighboring country, and you hardly hear about Somalia. That's why I was saying 2/3 of Somalia has always been peaceful.
Right.
Why don't we help build Somalia through that? And you saw also last week election.
Right.
They were saying this week, everybody saying the most corrupted nation in the world, but the least corrupted president was elected peacefully. So we have a great opportunity here to either support Somalia or leave it Somalia to itself. So too many intervention is the problem. That's and this is also what's happening in South Sudan and the whole region.
Which brings up two questions that I have based on what you said. You said that Japan's hands are not that wasn't what you said. Not that they're not clean, but Japan is not innocent. That was it.
Yeah.
And and then also that you are still in a game, in a great game that is being played there.
Yeah.
Well, I know you can't say directly anything bad about anyone in Japan since you're a representative here.
What I say is not clean. What I mean, the issue of the illegal fishing. Japan is the largest fish consumer of the world. The biggest fish market is here. They are not innocent in the matter of looting Somali natural resources. And in the case of Mr. Kimura, well-known Sushi Zanmai,
right?
He openly claims that he's the man who stopped all the Somali pirates because he invested, he trained them, he gave them jobs, which none of it is true. And these kind of issues are very dangerous because Somali people are aware of the looting. We are actually now using a satellite tracking, knowing what boat is entering Somali territorial sea, what country they belong to, and now there's a process of documenting, and one day we will take to the international court to pay the price. Yeah.
Let's talk about the South Sudan.
Yeah, and the great game which Japan and China are playing there. I mean, you're here in Tokyo, and when you interact with Japan's diplomats or other diplomats here, what is the story that you're trying to tell? I mean, you're in a very delicate position.
Well, Japan, Abe, last, I think it was August, there was a ticket, a Tokyo International African
Right.
ticket in Nairobi, Kenya. Japan is trying to compete and invest in Africa, but they come in late because the Chinese have been involved in Africa for a very, very long time. And also they have been very, they don't get involved in the politics of the nation. Japan has very strict rules when it comes to aid and supporting. They have to be democratic, they has to be peaceful and so forth. The Chinese doesn't care. China will go and say, we want to invest, we have interest here, and they put the money and they don't touch the internal politics of that country. And Ethiopia is a landlocked country, the fastest growing economy, 10%. China has invested heavily. They build railroad. This is the only country in Africa that I know that has a subway, trains running, owned by the Chinese, built by the Chinese. African Union headquarters, built by the Chinese, invested by the Chinese, and so forth. So Japan has every
it
right
will
to
pass
invest.
Japan in terms of population around the year 2040.
Yeah.
It will become a larger country than Japan.
Yes.
So it's a major source. Yeah.
Yes. And 1 million Chinese are living now in Africa, over 1 million people. So that's a large number.
That's a lot of Chinese
That's
restaurants.
a lot of Chinese, exactly. An investment, yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you look at 2014 alone, China invested more than $30 billion in infrastructure in Africa. That we're talking about big money. Ethiopia, they give $20 billion for infrastructure alone and so forth. Let's not talk about Angola and Mozambique and other countries, and also in Djibouti and so forth.
Right.
So there is that competition, but it's good for Africa because we have more options. Whoever comes, we welcome because we would like to develop fast, but also we have to look after our own interest. But I hope we don't get destroyed in between these big, powerful economies.
Right. The new government is providing a lot of hope for the people. The refugees in the neighboring countries are also kind of celebrating. This is a return to peace.
Somalia has been very peaceful, actually. I don't know why. We don't have a civil war like South Sudan. We deal in a small group called Al-Shabaab, which is a terror group, and they're committing some suicide bombing now and then. It happens everywhere else in the world. But Somalia today, for the last 10, we don't have any civil war.
Well, didn't the rebels also say with the new president,
With the new
we'll now lay down on...
Yes, their top leaders, they say we will join the new government. 2 days ago, they released 200 prisoners. So there is a window of opportunity. But that we will all depend on how the international community come to support this new government.
Yeah.
And the Somali mood is people are ready for peace, and corrupt leaders are gone. So, but he has still a lot of work to do. It's not easy.
Well, the thing that interests me the most about Somalia is this fake news, this portrayal of a country that's constantly at war, but in fact it has received carpet bombing. It has been attacked by the neighboring countries, and the other countries, even the UN, the United States, turns a blind eye, looks elsewhere, and blames them for, Black Hawk Down and all sorts of just, nasty news.
Well, the media, yes, you're right. And one of the reasons why our president won is also because thanks to the social media. And I think also that helped Donald Trump. So a lot of people are staying away from the mainstream media because they don't represent the facts accordingly. Yes, Somalia, if you look at the economy of Somalia, a country that they say is chaotic, is a failed state, our economy has been growing 3% every year without support from outside. Somali people who left the country went back to the country and invested in the country. We have over 1 million Somalis living in the diaspora who are sending money to the country, over $2 billion, which is more than any aid that we receive. We have relaxed.
These are Somalians living overseas that are repatriating money back
to their families, yes. We have one of the best telecommunication in the developing countries. It's well documented.
It's famous because they couldn't have landlines.
Yeah.
They couldn't have landlines, so everybody's got the cell phone, and you don't use cash.
No, we are a cashless society. I don't even know how people use. I was there in May, and you take a taxi, you push button on your cell phone, and you pay it. The hotel, the restaurant, you don't see any cash. So highly advanced, and all done by the Somalis themselves. Somalis are highly entrepreneurial. The banking system is working very well. Telecommunication, livestock. We are the largest livestock exporter in the world. 5 million animals every year to the Middle East. That's half of what Australia exports.
Wow!
So we have a very rich country, and we can develop our country quickly if the international community does not involve heavily in manipulating. Even the election, there was a lot. Why we selected elected this president? It was too many foreign interference on the Somali, and the Somali parliament and people were so fed up, were so open that these countries were bringing cash to support their guy. But people chose the right guy this time. And it shows that the Somali people are ready for peace.
So, can I ask a question? If I know that it's completely ridiculous that anyone in the Japanese government would be watching, but if they were, and they had something to say to Mr. Abe, what is the message to Mr. Abe?
But I can tell you, the Japanese officials that I know, they're highly interested in Somalia. They know the country's potential. They know the country's strategic location, but they are wait and see game. But they're highly, highly interested, and I know that for fact. Now, of course, they have a base in Djibouti. Djibouti used to be a small city of Somalia that became independent in 1977. Arid land, there's no agriculture, there's nothing in that region. But Somalia, with the fish, with the oil, with the gas, agriculture and so forth, they're highly interested in. But I think they're waiting to see how we Somalis, it has to come from us Somalis actually, to show international community that we are stable enough, you can come in and invest our country and so forth. And it will happen soon.
One other issue I'd like to touch upon is the nuclear waste that continues to wash up on the shores there. What in the heck is going on there? Nobody has been reporting about that, but it's like it's just a trash dump for the people who are supposed to be taking nuclear waste and recycling it or burying it someplace else. They just take it to the most unprotected shoreline and they dump it there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this has been going on since the collapse of Somali central government in 1990. These are well documented. The UN knows, the international community knows, but they turn a blind eye on it. And we tried many years ago to bring up this issue and say this is a serious matter. But they were saying, where's the evidence? Because these massive containers were sitting
on the bottom
of the sea. But thanks to the tsunami in 2004, Christmas, that tsunami reached all the way to Somali coastal area. It destroyed a lot of houses, and it brought up this. And then we invited the UN, UNEP. They were there for 2 days. They say,
and they got
bad,
they got out.
They got out, yes. And it's still, there's no one cleaning. And that is actually what caused the Somali so-called pirates attack tankers, oil tankers and chemical tankers and cargoes and so forth. Before they used to capture illegal fishing, but that was any boat passing Somali territorial sea must be carrying nuclear waste. That was an excuse also for many people to do it. Yeah.
And that has been somewhat resolved?
No, not resolved, because
it's still
nobody
occurring.
wants to actually take responsibility of it. Yeah. So still those are there, but illegal fishing today is worse than it was before.
Would like to keep you on the show. Please come back again. We're going to continue to follow this. Please stay tuned.